Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Little of PokerCoaching.com, and today we're going to answer the question that I've been getting a ton recently. How do I adjust to the new Big Blind Ante structure? This is a question that one of my students asked recently. They say their casino just started using the Big Blind Ante, and we know that the World Series of Poker is doing the same in their no-limit hold'em tournaments. So, what adjustment should we be making to account for it? Well, first things first, it does not matter who put the money in the pot. Some players, a lot of players actually, think that they should defend their big blind way more often because they put in the entire ante. To make it clear, the big blind ante is when the big blind puts in the ante instead of everybody else putting in a much smaller ante. The purpose of this is to speed the game up and make the game faster because the dealer doesn't have to go around and collecting a little tiny bit of money from everyone, pulling it in the middle, counting it, making sure it's right, etc., etc. So, the Big Blind Ante speeds up the game. It lets you play more poker. And presumably, if you went to go play a poker tournament or a cash game that uses a big uses one ante, you want to actually play poker. You don't want to sit there and watch the dealer deal with tedious nonsense, right? So the Big Blind Ante speeds up the game. Understand that it does not matter who put the money in, and if you put in the money, the fact that you put it in should not make you want to defend the pot anymore. The idea of that is completely false. It does not matter who put chips in the pot. Once the chips are in the pot, understand that they are no longer yours. Sure, you may have equity in the pot, and normally if let's say you're defending the big blind, you're getting a discount on your call, so you should play more hands. But whoever puts in the ante, they have to understand that money is completely dead and irrelevant. Let's say the button pays the ante in your game. Sometimes the button does. The button should not defend more hands because they paid the ante. They just shouldn't. It's completely irrelevant. Let's compare this to a rack attack in a cash game, which is where, let's say you're playing 1-2 no limit. The casino, the house, will put $100 in the pot randomly. But let's say they have a promotion where if someone makes a straight flush at your table, they put $100 in the next pot. Okay. The fact that you did not put that money in, should that matter? No, there's $100 extra in the pot. You should be in there fighting hard for that, right? No one at that table is thinking, I didn't put it in, forget about it. No, they're in there battling as they should because getting that $100 is very, very valuable. And just because you did not put in the ante does not mean that it should become irrelevant to you. And just because you did put it in does not mean you should all of a sudden fight incredibly hard for it. Everyone at the table has a little bit of equity in it. And on average, everyone pays the same amount of antes, right? Let's take a look at what has actually changed with the Big Blind Ante, okay? Let's say normally you're playing 100-200 with a 25 ante at a 10-handed table. How much is in the pot pre-flop? Well, there is the small blind for 100, the big blind for 200, and then the antes for 25 times 10, which is 250, so 550. Next, at 100-200 with a 200 Big Blind Ante, which the ante is almost always the size of the big blind. How much is in the pot pre-flop? Well, it's 500, right? So the situation is exactly the same, except whenever you're playing 10-handed or 9-handed, you should be defending a little bit more often because there's a little bit more money in the pot. Let's say instead we're 8-handed, which is very often what you will be playing, right? Now, the situation literally is exactly the same. Let's say instead you're playing 4-handed with the ante. Well, now there's only 400 in the pot here. So now in this game, you should be defending wider. You should be defending the big blind more often in this game, right? Because there's more money in the pot. Basically, whichever game has more money in the pot proportionally, you should be defending wider because of better pot odds. But normally, this is what we're going to be looking at. 8-handed play in both games, give or take, and you should be playing exactly the same strategy. Don't think that this Big Blind Ante change is some gigantic change to the structure of poker. It is not. Let's discuss how some people will adjust, though. So some people will adjust by defending more often in the big blind, essentially thinking, I put that money in, I need to fight for it. And believe it or not, this is actually a good adjustment for most people because most people drastically underdefend their blinds. They think they're only supposed to play with the absolute best hands, but that is far from the truth. You actually need to be in there fighting decently hard from the blind because you're getting great pot odds. And the fact that they put that ante in, and it's just very clearly, there are 200 chips out there, right? They realize, oh, hi, I'm getting pot odds now. And that makes them call more. So this will result in them having wider post-flop ranges, which they may or may not defend properly. One thing I've seen happen is a lot of people will call the big blind from the big blind way more often, but then check fold on the flop way too often. So they are very uncomfortable knowing how to play with slightly wider ranges than they are used to, and that makes just blindly continuation betting pretty decent. For the longest time, people started in the high stakes games defending their blinds well, and then they would also play post-flop well. Well, now we need to make sure we're making it bigger to price them out, right? Pre-flop. But now, in the smaller stakes games, people are defending wide as they should, but then they're defending very poorly post-flop. So that's going to make them very susceptible to increased aggression. So see how that works in your games and go from there. There are a few intelligent adjustments you should be making, though. Is this the same slide? It is. So short stacked adjustments. Again, think about what has actually changed due to this big blind ante. When you pay the big blind, you put one big blind dead into the pot, right? That means you can win that money back, but it does not count toward any bets that you put in. While this is almost irrelevant when you're playing deeper stacked, when you have about 10 big blinds or fewer, this becomes quite costly because let's say you're under the gun and you have 10 big blinds, but then you're now all of a sudden in the big blind and now you have 9 big blinds because you just put the ante in, and one of your big blinds goes into the pot for the big blind. That is quite costly, right? So, as far as I know, this has not been solved yet. I've tasked a few of my mathematician friends with solving this situation for me, but it is very obvious that you should be pushing all in wider than the push-fold charts recommend once you get down to about 10 or fewer big blinds from middle and early positions. Because you're going to be taking that, the big blind and the ante soon. This came up for me recently in a World Poker Tour tournament I took 8th place in, where I played a big pot. I had top pair against the set. I got down to no chips. I had like 6 big blinds left. And then I was under the gun +2 with, what I have? I had 9-3 offsuit and I folded for 6 big blinds. But then I got 8-7 offsuit under the gun +1 and decided to shove it all in. And in that scenario, normally you can only shove for about 4 big blinds. But because of this big blind ante, I am pretty sure that shoving all in was optimal. And I say pretty sure because, again, we have not solved for this yet. You have to account not for only the individual hand, but also the future hands where you're going to have a significant cut into your stack. And then if you fold that hand, what happens then, etc., etc. Note if I fold that hand, 8-7 offsuit under the gun, next hand I'm going to be down to 5 big blinds with one of my big blinds dead in the pot. It's like 18% of my stack just gone. And just losing 18% of your stack because you fold it a hand is rough. So I open jam the 8-7 and I somehow won the all-in. Then we are up to 12 or 13 big blinds. And from there we had a shot. We ended up getting all in, I think, with 10s against ace-queen, but we lost. Anyway, that was a spot that came up recently for me. But in general, nothing changes when you're playing more than about 10 or so big blinds deep. And even then, I don't think the adjustments need to make are gigantic. Let's talk about one more thing. There was a hand that I believe Stephen Chidwick played recently in a super high roller tournament where he made a big bluff with all but one chip. And if you watch a lot of the best players in the world now, they are, whenever they do go all in, or were going to go all in, they go all in with everything besides one chip. And the reason for this, one chip being one big blind, the reason for this is because if they lose the hand, even if they were value betting, on the next hand, they only need 29% equity to show a profit. And it's really easy to have 29% equity in No Limit Texas Hold'em. So, how do we get that number? We take your bet plus the big blind plus the ante plus the small blind. That is the total pot, right? So we have 1, 2, 3.5. On the next hand you play, you're going to be putting in one big blind to try to win 3.5 big blinds, which means you only need to have 29% equity. Now, of course, maybe there'll be a raise and a call, so that cuts into it a bit. But more often than not, if you play a heads-up pot, you're just loving it, especially if someone else raises pre-flop, because then there's their big blind in the pot too. So that's kind of a neat adjustment people have been making where they save one big blind. And I do think that's going to end up becoming normal. You'll very rarely hear all in the future because you want to go all in minus one chip. One thing you do have to be aware of is that there may be some world where if you bluff with almost the nut low and your opponents know you're capable of doing this, and they know you're going to fold to an all-in, let's say 1% of the time, they may actually start bluffing you all in for one more chip. Now, I don't think that's going to happen anytime in the near future, but say you do decide to bluff, and you know your bluff is a bluff with like bottom pair or king high or something like that, and it's just like a good, normal, fundamentally sound bluff. If your opponent does jam in on top of you, you need to be putting that one more chip in. But if you are bluffing with legitimately the nut low, then maybe it's fine to still fold, but you have to ask, am I inducing a bluff ever? And if you ever are inducing a bluff, well then maybe you want to make bluffs with a tiny bit stronger range that can then very confidently call that extra one big blind into the 50 or 100 or 200 big blind pot. But we'll see how poker plays out. Currently, it is yet to be seen exactly the adjustments that people are making. But all in all, what's the summary? What does the big blind ante change? Nothing. It makes the game faster. People are now emailing me saying they're afraid to play this new structure because it's so different. But it is not different. The game is essentially the same. Don't be scared. Don't be afraid. It really is the same game. So don't make something out of nothing just because there is a change. A lot of people like to make a big deal out of changes, but really, it's not a big deal. So let me tell you about my poker training site while you're here. It is pokercoaching.com. You can go there and get a completely free 7-day trial. We have a lot of interactive hand quizzes where I put you in a situation and throughout an entire hand, and I ask you to give me your best play. You tell me the best play that you would like to make, and then I give you a score, 1 to 10, on how I like your play. And then also I will give you my opinion on the situation. There are tons and tons of quizzes. They are highly valuable. I definitely suggest you check those out. Also, at Poker Coaching, we have many interactive homework challenges where I task you to answer a relatively difficult situation. Like, how would you play your whole range in a particular spot? You tell me, and then I go back and grade it. I personally review all of the answers that come in a live webinar. That way you can learn from not only my answer, where I tell you what I would do, but also you learn from everyone else. And you also learn how to balance your range and then how to adjust to take advantage of whatever your opponents do incorrectly. So check that out. You can get a completely free 7-day trial at pokercoaching.com. No credit card is required. Hope you enjoy it. Good luck in your games. Thanks for watching this video. If any of your friends need it, please share it with them, because that's going to help them better their poker and their life. Thanks a lot. Good luck in your games, and I'll talk to you next time.